Alright, this is our second video on Reagan. This is foreign affairs. Now I've left out the Cold War here because we already covered that, so no mention of SDI, Star Wars, etc. But a funny little joke if we go back to what we learned about Reagan and domestic, and that was that if Reagan didn't like something, he would smash it, and they actually had that Hulk smash, and they had Reagan smash, Reagan mad. It was a dumb joke, I know, but it was the 80s, and most stuff was dumb. So, we're going to look at his foreign affairs, a lot of invasion stuff going on here, new terrorist groups, and things like that. First off, his wife, Nancy Reagan, is the one who gave us the Just Say No campaign, and Reagan will declare a war on drugs. Now, drugs have been in this country really prominently from the 60s with the counterculture movement, but this is now the street movement of drugs and gangs and things like that. And they're out to kind of correct that problem. Now it's been 30 plus years since the war on drugs. Has the war on drugs worked? And the answer to that is no, it has not. Drugs are more prevalent than ever. It's a very lucrative business for people, and it's actually caused a divide between a group of population and cops. Is it a great moral idea? Yes. But I would actually think of it as more kind of a modern prohibition movement. Just because you make it illegal doesn't stop people from doing it. But it's great in its morals and intention, much like prohibition, but it gave rise to other problems. Now, in 1983, Lebanon is in the midst of a pretty nasty civil war, and the United States is involved at this point. We are there. And we actually have a bunch of Marines in Beirut, which Beirut is the capital of Lebanon. And as you can see here, in 1983 they actually bombed the barracks. And this was probably the worst killing of U.S. soldiers in about 20 years since Vietnam. However, we do not invade Lebanon because we technically weren't even supposed to be there. And so we kind of push things under the rug. But it does come back here in a little while. But it was a horrible bombing, and not many people choose to talk about it. It's very similar if you go to the Benghazi thing. It's something that people just kind of want to push aside and go, it didn't happen. Now, also in 1983, through Operation Urgent Fury, the United States military, particularly Marines, will invade the country of Grenada. It's not Grenada. That's what we call it down here in the South, Grenada. It is Grenada. Okay, it's an island. It's maybe the size of Rhode Island, and we invade it. Now, why did we invade it? The leader had actually been taken over in a very bloody coup. They moved him from house arrest. They killed him and all his followers, and so through Operation Urgent Fury, the United States is there to kind of try to fix that. Now, there's a ton, given Lebanon and Grenada in 1983, a ton of international backlash at the United States. Why are you invading these tiny countries when you are this massive country? In the case of Lebanon, it was protecting people. And in the case of Grenada, it's an old thing come back to play, communism. We were there to stop communism. And so Reagan really is back in that similar mode of what we talked about, Reagan smash, Reagan mad, okay? But let's continue. The country that made Reagan the maddest was Nicaragua. Nicaragua actually had a communist revolution. They had a man named Daniel Ortega, and Daniel Ortega was in charge of a group called the Sandinistas. The Sandinistas were communists. They wanted to make Nicaragua communist, and so through this, Reagan begins to supply and outfit and support a counter-revolutionary group. In fact, their name means against, and we call them the Contras. So we're helping the Contras to win back in Nicaragua and defeat the Sandinistas. Okay? And so you can see right there, stop communism in Central America, and all this is going on. All right? Congress is now afraid, with the amount of money that begins to start circulating, that Nicaragua could become another Vietnam. So to prevent this, Congress passes what is called the Boland Amendment. The Boland Amendment basically banned military aid to the Contras for 2 years. Okay? So for 2 years, you can't send any type of aid, military aid. You can give them humanitarian supplies, water, but you're not going to give them any weapons or training. However, as we're going to find out later on, Reagan and the Reagan administration actually found ways to funnel funds, which means kind of going around different avenues to get supplies to the Contras. I think that's going to come up in the next video when we talk about Iran. But it is interesting what happened, and it should have ruined Reagan, really, but it doesn't. Now, in 1987, we choose to go after another man in the name of human rights, and this is where Libya first hits the scene, okay? Libya was controlled by a dictator named Muammar Gaddafi, and Gaddafi was a pretty horrible man. He had a lot of human rights issues, or a lot of reports of torture. So in 1987, the United States will bomb Libya with the intention of getting rid of Muammar Gaddafi. Did it work? No. And what it actually did is it drove Gaddafi into the arms of Saddam Hussein, who we've already kind of, well, we haven't mentioned him yet. Sorry, he's coming up in a second. And some other people, and bin Laden and people like this, and they kind of create this alliance of hating the United States. Now, what happens to Muammar Gaddafi? Ultimately, in something called the Arab Spring, he will be captured and killed and replaced. And Libya, right now, is probably one of the most volatile or explosive countries in the world. Just a drop of a hat, it could be an all-out civil war, and it's crazy. But this is the first time we hear of that. Now, we have new terrorist groups and a new country. This is kind of interesting. In that area where Israel was created, a new country is created called Palestine. Palestine is essentially Jerusalem for Muslims. Okay? And here we have two new groups that hit the scene. The first is called Hamas. Hamas is going to be, right now they're labeled a terrorist group by the United States. They're going to be the ones in Lebanon and that were bombing in Beirut and all these pieces like that. And the last one, you can see the flag here in the front there called Hezbollah. Hezbollah are Iranians. And so this is kind of an Iranian-backed terrorist group, and they pop up from time to time. And so Hamas and Hezbollah are going to challenge the Israeli Liberation Force in Jerusalem. And these are the countries that are fighting, and we monitor this constantly, hoping that nothing will get out of hand. All right, but there's some new groups that we need to keep aware of. We have one more video about Reagan, and it's about a country we really can't get a feel on, and that's Reagan's deal with Iran.